We know the president was talking to several audiences at the same time when he made his comments on July 2011. In some ways, we think right now it's probably giving our enemy sustenance. We think that he may be saying to himself, in fact, we've intercepted communications that say, hey, you know, we only have to hold out for so long.
And the message that July 2011 was meant to convey was not one that we are going to head for the exits and look for the light switch to turn it out as we head out the door. It was not about an exodus. It was really about a message of urgency.
Two generals, one the Marine Corps Commandant, one the top man on the ground in Afghanistan, describing and explaining the July 2011 date brought up by President Obama about Afghanistan and when troops would start moving out or begin the process to do that. What about this back and forth and other elements of General Petraeus' interview with Jennifer Griffin? Let's bring in our panel. Mark Tapscott, the editorial page editor of the Washington Examiner. We welcome Mark. Erin Billings, deputy editor of Roll Call, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles, first, let's talk about General Conway's comments. He's a plain-spoken guy. He says it like it is. I know General Conway, and he was asked a question about July 2011 and gave that answer.
I think it's absolutely astonishing. This is a serving soldier, the leader of the Marine Corps, the commandant, who's basically saying that his commander-in-chief has given sustenance, which is a polite way of saying aid and abetting the enemy. Now, a lot of us have said this. We've said it a dozen times on the set because it's pretty obvious, but it's different if it comes from someone in the chain of command. Now, it's true that Conway is leaving at the end of the year, but nonetheless, he's active duty now. That's quite remarkable. And the more interesting element of this is not just that it's his opinion, but he cites evidence from intercepted communications where they tell each other we have to wait it out. And you notice he doesn't cite a contrary communication in which a guy says, oh, Ahmed, I watched the Secretary of Defense on ABC News and he walked it back. That level of analysis doesn't exist in Afghanistan. What's happening is the president's statement is truly making it difficult to fight the war. I think what was interesting is how Petraeus attempts to finesse this. He says, well, it means that in July 2011, if there are areas that are entirely under our control and it is safe, we will transfer over to Afghan authorities, which is plausible. You know, there might be, the main hockey rink in the capital will be turned over if it's in a secure area. But essentially, I think all of them are really regretting the announcement of a data withdrawal and telling the president openly it's a mistake, and he needs himself to walk it back.
Erin, to be fair to General Conway, he went on to talk about how his Marines are going to be on the ground after July 2011 and turned it around saying it could be an advantage that some of the Taliban will take it on the chin from Marines who are going to be going after them, even though perhaps the Taliban thinks the U.S. is all leaving. That said, however you cut that comment, the administration comes off on the short end of the stick.
And I'm sure the administration is not happy that he made those comments. If he were not leaving at the end of the year, I wonder what other conversations might be going on behind the scenes. Having said that, I don't think anyone is under any illusion that we're getting out of there on July 2011 hard and fast. And Petraeus has said that, and even the president has said, look, this is a starting point. And as Petraeus said earlier in the interview with Ms. Griffin, that this is a starting point, and this is a time when we're maybe doing some limited withdrawals. But I don't think anyone is under any illusion that we're getting out in July 2011, regardless of the politics.
Mark, thoughts?
If you go back to Obama's speech at West Point, he did not say definitively, hard and fast, we will be out beginning in July. He said a process would begin. Administration people since then have talked about it, and political people have accepted it as a hard and fast rule.
Vice President Biden, among them, quoted in a book saying, bet on it.
But I have to wonder, I think the most interesting thing about his comment is he must have felt some sense of freedom or opportunity to say that.
General Conway.
Yes, General Conway.
Well, so when you announce a process, and that's a very, subtle notion, and war isn't a subtle operation, you've got Afghans on the ground whose lives are at stake if they choose the wrong side.
Absolutely.
And they hear a president say our forces out of Afghanistan in July of 2011 to begin the transfer. Well, that sounds like the Americans are leaving.
Yeah, Mark, another thing that struck me was the talk about reconciliation with the Taliban. I mean, General Petraeus went into fair detail about how the Afghans are reaching out. What about that? I mean, is that how U.S. officials think perhaps that this is an end game in Afghanistan? I
was struck that he very quickly acknowledged that, yes, we have been at least facilitating some. The whole discussion here reminds me, frankly, of I'm old enough to remember the neutralist government that was established supposedly in Laos in 1962, and that didn't work out very well. It was a reconciliationist government.
General Petraeus, Erin mentioned sitting down in Iraq with folks who had U.S. blood on their hands, and he mentioned Northern Ireland. I mean, he got into fair detail about how this is going forward.
That's right. I mean, and you mentioned the Taliban. I mean, you know, they do have to get them to the table, and that, I think, underscores how long this process might take. I mean, you know, we don't know how this is going to play out. Karzai obviously has been somewhat of an unpredictable player in all of this. So yeah.
Last word, Charles. There are critics out there who say, are there really moderate Taliban?
Well, it isn't as if there were moderates in Iraq. It was Iraqis, Sunnis who opposed us, opposed the new regime after the fall of Saddam, who were so incensed by what al-Qaeda had done that they turned against it. We don't have, and then it sought our assistance and it became our ally. It wasn't as if it had a change of heart suddenly overnight. Here, I don't see a lot of evidence of elements of the insurgents against us split against other elements, and thus looking for an alliance. So I think the situation is different, and we haven't heard of a lot of elements in the enemy in Afghanistan who have now gone over and become our allies.
Perhaps we'll start to hear that. You can read the full transcript of Jennifer Griffin's interview with General Petraeus in the show notes section of our homepage at foxnews.com/special report. Up next, a cold reception for an incumbent in Alaska.